Today I went to a show. It was a retro collector show. It was, I think, the first time the show had happened, or maybe the second time. And I'll show you some quick clips here. There's a lot of toys, collectibles, video games, a lot of Pokemon cards. The overall vibe of the show was pretty cool. It was a little strange getting to go to a show that it was local. It was literally like only 20 minutes from my house, which was great. Um, but it was funny going to a show and kind of knowing that, like, okay, I'll just be attending shows this year. But yeah, I got over it pretty quickly. Caught up with a few friends, hung out with my brother there. That was very cool. And then after that, we went around and just went to just some different places. Best and most rad thing was we ended up going to an arcade, and I got to play on Zaxxon, Tron, uh, played the hell out of Galaga, Miss Pac-Man, Street Fighter. It was an arcade that was in the mall. I hadn't gone to it prior. And it's one of those where you get a little wristband, like you pay $10 and you get unlimited plays in there on most of the machines. They had pinball games in the back that were pretty cool. I didn't play any of those. Those cost extra. And that was really the majority of the day. I really needed a day to just decompress and do that sort of stuff. And I did end up picking up a couple of cool things. Ended up picking up this Ankylosaurus. This is from the Jurassic Park line, and if you swing his tail, it makes a noise. And then I also ended up finding this really rad thing. This Robert Muldoon is one of my favorite characters from Jurassic Park. Now, this is from the now discontinued series, the Amber Collection, which is really a shame. It was the 6-inch one, so it would go with all the rest of the figures that are coming out that collectors really like. But I really dug this one a lot. I'm going to replace his shock wand with probably an upscaled version of his shotgun that he used in the movie when he was trying to distract and find the Velociraptors while him and Ellie Sattler were out. Aside from that, oh man, I know I picked up some other things. I found a really cool old vintage robot for $4. That was actually at the mall. And then a couple of other little bits and bobs, odds and ends. Picked up a really cool, I don't know where I put it. I've already lost it. A really cool miniature Futurama's Planet Express ship. And it's weird. Every once in a while when you go to these shows, it's kind of surprising what you'll find. It'll just be out of the blue. But it was the one that came from Loot Crate. And it's actually, I know I've got that box here somewhere. But I don't know where I put it. I will have to find it. Oh, there it is. Okay, so this is just the outside box design here on this. I do love the graphic design on this. That's the ship right there. And I know I put it here somewhere in the studio, and I forget already where I put it. And I'm on camera, so I don't want to take the time to go get it. But it is a beautiful, beautiful little ship. It's really only about as, you know, the box is not that large, so you can kind of tell. But I've always loved the art design and stuff like that for Futurama, and I'm really looking forward to the new show reboot that is happening, I think on Hulu, I think. Oh man, aside from that, I'm up once again late. I'm going to be working on some stuff tonight and hopefully completing a lot of things by tomorrow evening that I really am behind on. And then, as you saw, this last video, I did a real quick thing. I'll explain a little bit behind the scenes on that, on the mural bit. I only had a little bit of time there because I was super behind on some stuff I had to knock out, and I had some things I had to turn around real quickly. But essentially, so there was an opportunity to do 2 murals. And one had come up where it was going to be a mural that was going to be at an Airbnb. So that was the first main footage you saw. I'll get better footage of it. Basically, it's like a stairwell and a couple of other things. It's just a bid. It doesn't mean anything's, you know, cemented. This is how a lot of stuff works. For those of you that aren't artists, a lot of times whenever anybody you know that's creative, anyone doing this sort of stuff goes out and puts a bid in on a mural or any sort of work like that, there's also going to be other people that will put in for that and will kind of, you know, put, okay, well, I can do this, like a stairwell like that. I don't know, you know, haven't, honestly, it's taking measurements. It's figuring out, okay, what are the initial designs? How many stairs are there? How do I have to break down the design? What's the time going to cost? What is the paint going to cost? You know, what sort of paint am I getting? Just a lot of doubles in the details sort of thing going on. Also, what are the walls going to be painted? They're not going to stay white in that place. You know, what is their overall decor going to look like? So I'm waiting for some things like a Pinterest board to be sent to me with some ideas of what the hardware, flooring, tiles, carpeting, wood stain colors, anything else like that is going to be like. So then that way I can try and acclimate whatever design I have to either complement, contradict on purpose, or, you know, do something else that maybe fits the ideas they had. And then some wild things. And then the second stuff, the real last end clip that I showed was for a skate park that was located not that far away. And they wanted to bid on some original art there. So I've got to do some measurements and figure out some stuff for the stuff they want there. The good thing is that, you know, that's a really nice outlet. That's another extra aspect, but the gamble is whether or not the price point you bring, the value, and the end results all pay off in the long run. A lot of times, if you go back a few videos, I was talking about why I have issues sometimes with grants not being wide enough in their respective capacity for artists to be able to use them to live off of. They must always have to be community-based projects or something. The beautiful thing about murals is, in most circumstances, you're submitting an idea that you feel complements your capacity and capabilities, but also solves the problem of a necessary design being requested for a particular facet, whether that's outdoor stairs, a wall, whatever the case might be. Now, there's a lot of, you know, red tape and weird threads you have to try and traverse in that process. Depending on the city, there could be zoning conduct, there could be all kinds of things that happen. Like, you know, one business will go, I don't want to look at this dumb mural all year long, I don't want to see it for the rest of my life. Or maybe somebody doesn't own the building, or maybe it's just prohibitive in the cost. A lot of times muralists will break down, it's no different than when you're doing a painting or something. I don't tend to break it down by the square inch. You'll find a lot of painters that will say, well, my cost is per the square inch. So that's how they can justify doing a certain price point for something like an 8x8 painting on canvas up to a 24 by 36 or something like that. And then you can apply that same sort of fact, you know, to a mural, but instead you're doing it by the square foot. And then you're going across and you're taking into consideration, where am I working? You know, what other facets do I have to clean it? Do I have to do other things like that? Because a lot of times you have to have stuff like that power washed or whatever the case is. It's an interesting thing to do. It's one more aspect that I'm very new to, but I am trying to figure out how this fits into the rest of my year and what other things I can do. There are some other avenues I'm going to look down through into other aspects to redefine what my art business is. Hopefully the mural aspect can be something else that grows into it, and I can fit into a niche that will maybe not be, you know, too severely hard to get into. The problem is that, you know, and it's not even so much a problem as much as it is just a challenge. When you're doing these things, you're not the only person putting that out there, and you're always having to run through the idea that you could be undercut. You know, so if you put a bid in, there's nothing to stop another artist from coming along and saying, oh, okay, well, you know, whatever your bid was you were getting on that, I'm willing to go like $200, $500, $1,000 underneath that, just so they can get the job, just so they can get that acclaim, just so they can get that presence and that content for TikTok, for Instagram, whatever. It's not great, but it happens. And the problem is there are a lot of different creatives out there that are willing to sell themselves under the bus to be able to do that just so they have it. One of the worst things I can think of is that I definitely used to do that. I would often do things and go, well, you know, it's not that bad. I'll do it for the exposure. I'd feel bad. And although this isn't necessarily mural related, I remember years ago when I was sort of coaxed into this teaching position one-on-one. I don't teach one-on-one anymore. The majority of the reason for that is because number one, I don't have the time and the patience to really work out a curriculum. Two, when I started teaching in schools, that burned me out. I was like, okay, I've given what I can. But one-on-one, I thought, okay, maybe I could do that, help some artists out. I will and have worked and still work with many younger artists that will occasionally email me out of the blue and ask a question. And it's sort of a weird mentorship thing. And my door is always open to anyone that has any questions about what art is about or what they have to do. But when it came down to this is an example of a project that was teaching one-on-one where I was too nice. I basically had agreed with these parents that I would drive. This was just ridiculous now that I think about it. I was being paid, and I'm going to be completely frank here. It was an individual that had bought some of my work, and they had met me at a show, and I thought, okay, yeah. And they were like, well, do you give art lessons? I was like, yeah, I do. Usually I'm kind of new to this, and this was well before I had taught. And I said, probably like $15 an hour or something, and it was more just like, hey, I'll give them an outline, and I just kind of let them go and kind of guide them. But it wasn't going to be heavy instruction. It wasn't going to be theory, like, color theory or structure or, drawing from anatomical aspects or any of that stuff. It was going to be like kind of very basic stuff to get them started. And that was it. And I clearly underestimated the demand for that. The problem is that not only did I underestimate the demand, I also underestimated what the worth aspect was for anyone that didn't do art. You see, when I said 15, they stuck to that. They stuck to that so hard that I relented. I folded like a fucking chair. And when it came to actually going and teaching them, I found out that they lived very far away. They lived well on the other side of Lawrence. And I thought, I'm going to use just as much gas and fees taking the turnpike to get to where they are. I will have made no money. They could not comprehend it. And I remember I ended up teaching about 5 or 6 classes. What ended up happening was I was meeting them halfway. We ended up meeting at a library, and it was still in Lawrence, but it wasn't well past Lawrence. And even when I got there, I ended up having to do all the footwork, working out everything with the library and all of this stuff. And he just wasn't really feeling it. And I felt bad for the student because it was one where he clearly just wanted to draw. And I was celebrating this factor. He had a very eclectic, vibrant, and energetic concept. I had to struggle with a lot of things in this circumstance because I think he liked the work I did and assumed, and it's always a challenge with younger artists. They're like, oh, I see my work, I like my work, I think I'm just as good as a professional, I think I'm just as good as this. And I'm like, okay. And I had a real challenge trying to, just without going into more details, approach that. It was something I had not thought about. Now, you're probably wondering why I'm telling you guys all this, but I promise this does have to do with murals and other work aspects like this. What was happening was more and more elements were coming up as being problematic, challenging, or just things I completely fucking didn't even realize I was going to have to deal with. So when that happened, I was remiss. I was like, well, how am I going to fix this now? And I was so worried about hurting his feelings and then like not being able to measure up to what was necessary. But then at the same time, he wasn't really into the art lessons. And the bad part was they weren't really providing any art supplies. And I kept asking, hey, have him bring markers, glue, this sort of thing. Nothing was showing up. So I was driving out there and not having anything. And I always brought art supplies with me to work along with him. I ended up using more of my art supplies in the process because I felt bad for him. Well, after 5 or 6 sessions, I finally talked to them. I said, look, I'm going to have to increase my pay, probably to 30. And they balked. Lost their minds. And it was not good. I got the whole, well, that's not what we agreed to. Well, we're on a fixed income. Well, you know, this is why we homeschool him. This is why we do this sort of thing. And it was just one thing after another. And understand, aside from the fact that these people didn't really understand the worth aspect of my time, of the effort, of everything, to them, $15 was more than enough money. They didn't really care about the gas money. They didn't care about the turnpike cost. They didn't care about the cost of art materials. They didn't care about these things. The art supplies he did have, I found out later, had been donated. And so that was another challenge, was just trying to get them to understand what things cost. In the long run, I finally had to break off from it and say, this is what, you know, he's capable of doing. And what it was kind of underhanded, and I'm not proud of this, but I find a lot of lessons he just didn't want to do. He was bored with anatomy, he's bored with us. I was like, you know what? Let's just do some art you like. And I'm not gonna kid you guys, it was a shit show. It was not great, and the artwork was not really good. When his parents came and showed up, a lot of times previously I've been helping, kind of pushing him along, and the art was stilted. The end result wasn't so great, but it did turn out to be something palatable, something they felt like he was making a lot of progress with, but it was really a lot of my help in there. When I cut him loose and he did what he wanted, they were shocked, rather annoyed, and disappointed that it seemed like he had regressed. And I was like, no, this is what he does 100% by himself. This is when I let him do what he wants. It wasn't what they wanted. And it was a combination of, I managed to get out of it because they didn't call me again. And I learned a hard lesson then, that with anything I do, whether it's illustration or other stuff, I try really hard to work with people on prices. I really do. I get it. Okay? I do. But I also understand that I have to pay for food and bills and other stuff like that. I have to live. And just because somebody cannot afford you doesn't mean you should always cut down your prices. In a circumstance with something like murals, if you're able to, do the pricing more than fair for yourself. There will always be variables and weird shit that's going to happen that will fuck everything up if you're not careful. Always, always, always bid on the side of just, hey, something could go wrong. And I mean, that doesn't mean overvalue yourself, but it certainly means understand what you can bring to it and do something from there. So fingers crossed something will happen with those. If not, there's other ones and other things eventually down the year. I'm always surprised when they just pop up and I'm like, oh, well, I didn't even see that one coming. You know, and that goes for any project, anything like that. So anyway, I'm going to finish this one now. And then I'll get back to work. It'll be a good night. I'm going to be listening to some Studio Ghibli, and I'm going to chill out, and I'm going to work on some Photoshop stuff right now that I got to get done by tomorrow. And then, yeah, we'll go from there. Thanks for watching, guys. I appreciate it. I did manage to catch up with a few people, and I got some really cool comments from some of you watching these videos. Thank you so much. That is really, really rad. I don't have, I'm going to put this picture up here. You guys aren't going to understand, some of you that aren't into this. This Jeep is fucking awesome. And my buddy Chris asked me about it at the show we were at. Needless to say, this was the best fucking buy I've ever seen in my life. It was I think Chris, you paid like $40 for this thing, I believe. And I'm still fucking jealous you got it. I picked this damn thing up. Turned out when my brother was looking, because my brother's way more into G.I. Joe stuff than even I am, and he found out this was like a $200 Jeep, and it was just a fucking phenomenal buy. Now that the show's over, I can say that it's not a big deal or anything else like that. But yeah, this was not a bootleg. This was not a hand painted job. This was a real production model. It's a very rare one. And congratulations, dude. That's amazing. This is the kind of stuff I live for at these shows. It's the nerdy part of me that when I go to these shows and I find collectibles and I see friends get great deals, that's amazing. And, you know, there was no skin off the vendor. He didn't really know what he had. And, you know, he sold it like that. There was a lot of other vendors selling stuff. They didn't really know what the value was, but I understand this was their first time doing it. So, yeah, just crazy. Anyway, I want to leave you guys with that. So I'll catch you guys in the next entry.